Hello and welcome to Headlines. In his first parliamentary address, Mikhail Kavelashvili, Georgia's sixth president, expressed his open dissatisfaction with the country's European partners, accusing them of applying double standards, voiced his hope for a reset in US-Georgia relations under Donald Trump, and called for national unity in the face of what he described the ceaseless efforts by foreign-backed forces to weaken the nation. On the 4th of February, the president also described the current phase of Georgian history as one of survival, adding that this period will continue for some time, with threats to the country's stability likely to remain high until the war in Ukraine is over. President Kavelashvili also called for continued vigilance against those seeking to undermine the nation's sovereignty. Georgia has been subjected to heavy criticism, both from the European Union and the United States, in particular after the 26th of October parliamentary elections, with the opposition questioning the legitimacy of the current president, elected on the 14th of December of last year by the Electoral College, that is a parliament for the first time in the country's history. Well, quite a lot to unpack here, of course, and we should also try to understand the personality of the man in question, who was also a very successful football player back in the 90s and once graced the pitch of the Premier League, which was back then one of the best leagues of the world, and now is the best league in the world. Today I'm joined by two very distinguished guests, by Gulam Nikolashvili, radio host and communications advisor from Tbilisi, Georgia, and Nick Summerby, ex-footballer from Manchester City, Mr. Kavelashvili's former teammate and television pundit. Let's start with you, Nick. I understand you probably do not follow Georgian politics very, very closely. And so you joined Manchester City back in 1994, and Mr. Kavelashvili joined the club in 1996. You played together for 1 year. What was your first impression of him back then?
First and foremost, I don't usually follow politics, but I do now because I've got a friend who's a president. So that's I didn't think that had ever happened in my lifetime. It was, back in 96, and there was a certain Georgie King-Clatzy who came over first. There was quite a few Georgians what came over to England to play, and Georgie brought his friend over, Mikhail, a couple of months after he came on trial until he got his work permit, and then he got a contract under the famous Alan Ball. And the interesting story with this is when his debut, he scored against Manchester United. So that's not a bad one, just to start his career off with that. But yeah, it was difficult, I'd imagine, for him because of the language. But he had his friend with him, Georgie. But I was around him an awful lot. Spent company with him a lot of time because he moved in with Georgie. So Georgie's family would come over, his family would come over, and we would spend time together eating the lovely Georgian food and obviously getting him to learn the Mancunian, Manchester language, which I think he found a little bit strange.
What were his main personality traits? Was there anything about him making one think he could later become a leader and assume a very, very responsible job?
I don't think you could. I mean, especially in football, you'd never think someone would get a job like that. We're not renowned really for being the cleverest, hence the reason why we play football. And he wasn't distant, but he would come out. He had a good sarcasm with him. He had a good wit, which eventually came out. He was only slight as a build, you see. So when his personality came out, then you realise you were really onto something. And it helped. I do mention Georgie a lot because it's vitally important he had his friend with him to help him and to bring him out of his shell. He kept himself to himself a little bit. He was a family man. So he wasn't going out doing what me and Georgie were doing and having a good time and going out every weekend. He wasn't that type, but there was other players that were like that as well. Some people didn't enjoy that. But he was, the more and more it went on, the more he understood that it was a different place where he was living, and to understand what it was like in the north of England, and to understand that sarcasm is what we do. And we like a little bit of fun. It eventually came out with him. And once you start playing on a football pitch, there's a respect there anyway. And it's the way you travel around, you live in each other's pockets, and you get to understand, we got to understand what it's like to have a Georgian with us. It was the time when the influx of foreign players was coming in. So we understood as much as what he understood as well about the English game. But if you're asking me, when I went back, will he be a president of Georgia? I would say, what? I don't think anyone's going to be a president of anything. So when I heard the news, I had a chuckle to myself because I thought, brilliant, fantastic. When footballers go away from football, They don't usually go into politics. There's not many players around. There's only the likes of George Weah, who went on and was, I think, was the president of his country as well. It's not the thing what he's done as that. So when I heard the news, I thought, fantastic. Well, he deserves it because he's a decent guy, a good guy, and he's learned a lot from being in other countries, and obviously he's gone back to Georgia where there's that passion there, and obviously he spoke about it, and it's got him to where he is now. So I watch even more so now and try and understand it.
And when you heard the news in December, the 14th of December, were you surprised? I mean, was there an element of surprise in your reaction to that news?
Once again, I mean, my real friend out of the two of them, I do keep mentioning, is Georgie Kinclatsey. So I keep in contact with Georgie. So he speaks to me. He says, "You know who's going to be the next president of Georgia?" I said, "Who?" And that's when he told me. I went, "Wow!" And then all of a sudden, then the news broke out, and the amount of people would have texted me and said, "This is phenomenal. You played with this guy. What's he like?" And and all of a sudden now there's a huge interest, and you think, yeah, from that one point when he told me, even myself now, I go, right, I want to look into it. I want to see him. I want to go and see him, to be honest with you. I'm going to try and go over there at a certain point and then go and see him, and that would be nice. But it's definitely interesting. It's a massive talking point, and people ask me all the time now. It's given me a little bit of fame, actually. It's given me a little bit. I'm like, well, I like to go on with it a bit. So he's my friend. Don't worry. Anytime you want to go to Georgia, and I'll make a phone call to him, and we have a little bit of fun with that, though. But delighted, absolutely delighted for him. It's really good news.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Now we're going to move into politics. So thank you very much indeed. Ghulam, so we heard the speech on the 4th of February. What have you made of the parliamentary address by President Kavelashvili? Although under the current constitutional system, Georgia is a parliamentary republic with the post of president being of a ceremonial nature, this very speech gave an impression of being delivered by a man in charge of the nation's affairs. What is your take on that speech, and what's your general impression of that gravitas that was entailed at its core?
Thank you for having me, and I would like to express that despite the fact that Georgia's president mostly held the ceremonial character, as you mentioned already, the fact is that after quitting the active soccer career, Mr. Kavelashvili was actively involved in Georgian politics during the, I think mostly it's over a decade now, as he is the active person in Georgian politics. So he held his strong view, and he was the very close part of the Georgian dream, the ruling party of Georgia. So that's why his statements, it would be very hard to somehow distinguish his statements or what he made of his first appearance in Georgian parliament. And mostly it's everything he said, it expresses the beliefs, the stance, the position which is held and shared by the ruling party. So if you will see what he said, I think the key message of President Kavelashvili was that on October 26th, Georgian society chose peace, development, and protection of faith. So he expresses his conservative views, his beliefs, and the very crucial moments where now the Georgia stands, and how we are looking on the outside world, on our foreign relations, the dealing with opposition and so forth. Now we have a very hard times dealing with it. I think it's an unprecedented times. And for example, today is the day when, for example, the active members of Georgian parliament quit the memberships of the opposition parties since they declared themselves to boycott the working inside of this parliament. And so day by day, Georgian politics is changing according to the events since the last parliamentary election.
Absolutely. I mean, so currently Georgia is going through a very, very difficult stage. Relations with the European Union leave a lot to be desired. The accession process has been halted after the 26th of October parliamentary elections. The credentials of the Georgian delegation to Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe were ratified, but subject to reservations, and therefore the delegation halted its participation there. Then the president himself said that Georgia has had to walk on a knife's edge since the start of the war in Ukraine in 2022, claiming that the danger of destroying the country has not yet disappeared and will not disappear until the end of the war in Ukraine. Is Georgia truly in a survival mode now, you think?
You see, yes, we think that on February 24th, 2022, Russian Federation declared the so-called special military operation in Ukraine with clear intentions to remove democratically elected government and to demilitarize the country. Since then, we are watching the slow, bloody, and step-by-step advance of Russian armed forces in Ukrainian soil. Great Britain, for example, and its former Prime Minister Boris Johnson was a biggest supporter of Ukrainian sovereignty and proponent of military resistance. With support of West, Ukraine holds its frontiers with the greatest price. I mean, losing the territories with spending hundreds of thousands of lives and injured personnel, replaced the millions of people, devastated areas and demolishing infrastructure. They are facing decades of restorations time if war will end hypothetically now, and lots of billions of pounds of spending. It's ahead. And even after 3 years, we are watching the defeat of Ukraine. Nevertheless, the fact that Russia failed to accomplish its starting goal to change government and occupy the whole country. So why I'm speaking so much about the war in Ukraine? Because the starting of this war defined the situation in whole region and in Georgia in the same time. This is a war in our region, in post-Soviet space, because we are living in the same political context, and the pretext Russia used to start the war extends beyond of just Ukraine. So we understood this situation, that this happening.
So you're effectively saying that you do not want Ukraine's fate to be replicated in Georgia, and that is a fundamental cause of concern for Georgia as of today still.
We all should know that first step by Russia's military aggression in modern time was in Georgia, 2008. Yeah. Georgian territory by its size is exactly half of just England, and with 20 times less population than Great Britain. In 2008, we had just 3-day war before ceasefire and capitulation. Georgia is landlocked in South Caucasus, as Azerbaijan and Armenia, bordering with Russia and holding 2 occupied regions by Russia with military bases, etc. Russia is present in Georgia. All of the factors which I described very shortly creates the context Georgia was and is facing now extremely hard after the starting war in Ukraine. That's why since February 2022, Georgia declared that we would keep the peace position and keep the neutrality in an ongoing war. We are not creating one-sided sanctions against Russia, and we are supporting the Ukraine with aligning and signing all the resolutions in European Parliament. And this situation with war somehow this underlines all our politics we are dealing with Europe.
Since you mentioned about Georgia's territorial integrity and about those 2 regions of Georgia which are currently under foreign control, what is going to be this government's policy to ensure that that territorial integrity is recovered at some point soon?
You see,
because I believe the President himself in his parliamentary speech said something along the lines of that he hopes for the reconciliation with the people who are currently living in Abkhazia and also in the Skhinvali regions of Georgia?
So I think that Georgian politics now is that we are showing the independence and sovereignty of our politics, and somehow we are trying to be more attractive of these breakaway regions, and in the same time we are trying to show to all our neighbors that we are not the aggressive neighbor with the military perspectives of future, but we are trying to peacefully solve the conflict which we have here, not only in Georgia, but it's a whole the South Caucasian thing. And as we see that there was the biggest conflict in Mountain Karabakh, which is, I think, mostly solved now. Yes, there was some kind of use of armament, but despite of this, the two countries of Armenia and Azerbaijan dealing with each other, and they are mostly, it's a peaceful transition of this breakaway region. And so this sets some kind of precedent on this thing. And so future will show us what is the better steps to be taken. But now Georgia needs to show that it has only peaceful intentions, and that's why we examine the fact that there was some kind of demand from Georgia to express more kind of aggressive rhetoric against Russia or take sides, and that's why it was perceived like a danger.
And also, sorry, Gulam. President also mentioned about Donald Trump. He praised his qualities. He said that Georgia shares the conservative values. What are the chances that a true reset in Georgia-US relations could happen now, very soon indeed? Do you think that President Kavalashvili's optimism related to President Trump's reascendance to power is actually justified?
You say our politics has the kind of two dimensions. One is the values, which of course we have the shared values with new elected President Trump and for example, the couple of European countries, for example, Viktor Orban in Hungary and other Robert Fico in Slovakia, and this aligns us with this conservative part. And second thing is the geopolitics. As I described already, we have our own policy, the kind of peaceful project of Georgia. And if it do not fit with the American interests, anyway, we will hold our beliefs and our policy because we are, I think, deeply believe that this is the only way, because all other way will just bring the devastation and war and some kind of conflict, and we have the kind of record of this.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Gulam Nikolashvili. I'm so grateful to you for your time.
Thank you.
Today I've conversed with Nick Summerby, former Premier League player, who has known President Kavalashvili since 1996 when they both played for Manchester City, and also with Gulam Nikolashvili, radio host, communications advisor, who joined us from Tbilisi, Georgia. See you very soon indeed.